Arthur Vance sat at the head of a long conference table inside a sleek, glass-walled meeting room in the heart of Manhattan. On the large screen was slide number 28, a revenue chart rendered in dark blue tones, neat, clinical, emotionless. The CFO was droning on about next quarter's profit margins, his voice no more engaging than the hum of a photocopier. Arthur was hearing, but not listening. Buzz, buzz. The iPhone in his suit pocket vibrated. Arthur glanced beneath the table. A message from his daughter Emily, a sophomore majoring in media studies at Stanford. "Dad, what is this attached?" was a TikTok link. Arthur tapped it. Within seconds, the image on screen made his body tense. A girl no older than 16 or 17 was huddled in front of the Alabaster Arch, the flagship boutique of Vance Atelier in Soho. Her cheeks were flushed with embarrassment, eyes brimmed with tears. A passerby's voice rang out clear and indignant. They kicked her out, just because her outfit wasn't up to standard. The camera wobbled slightly as the person filming stepped closer. The girl wore a faded hoodie. On her wrist, a charm bracelet shimmered faintly with worn metal. Arthur held his breath. The plating had peeled, but he recognized the design, instantly the Starlight model. He knew it was a counterfeit, but instead of anger, his chest tightened. Starlight was the first piece Arthur designed after his wife passed away from cancer. It wasn't just a product, it was a symbol of hope of light during the darkest days of his life. And now that very design had become the reason for shaming a young girl, someone who loved the brand enough to wear a cheap knockoff of it. The video cut again, the girl stepping away from the glass doors, a store employee turning their back with an icy expression. A bold caption appeared at the end of the clip, "Vance Atelier only for the rich." Arthur scrolled down. The video had already surpassed 10 million views. The hashtag #VanceGate was trending #1 on both Twitter and TikTok. Outrage flooded the comment sections. He looked up. One of the board members was staring intently at their phone, clearly watching the same video. Another lowered their gaze, trying to hide an awkward smirk. Arthur stood up abruptly. His voice came out sharp, cold as steel. "This meeting is over." The room froze. He turned to his assistant. "Cancel everything today. Call Grant. Tell him there's a rebellion. In my own house." No one dared stop him as he pushed open the doors. In the midday light, pouring through the glass hallway, Arthur Vance was no longer a CEO. He was a father, a husband, and a man who had just discovered that his creation was being twisted into something unrecognizable. The next morning, a man stood in front of the Alabaster Arch, the opulent headquarters of Vance Atelier. No one recognized him. A worn leather jacket, frayed at the shoulders, faded jeans, dust-covered sneakers, a baseball cap pulled low, obscuring most of his face, just enough to hide the marks of power. No one looked at that man and thought he was Arthur Vance, the founder of the very brand they revered. He stepped inside. The interior still gleamed, smelling of fine leather and luxury perfume. But the atmosphere was unusually cold, not from the air conditioning, but from the people. The staff moved like programmed machines, beautiful faces, perfect smiles, but eyes devoid of warmth. As Arthur approached the central counter, a woman stepped out to block his path. Tall, slim, her hair neatly tied back, and a smile that seemed rehearsed straight from a customer service manual. "May I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice soft as velvet, yet her eyes were cold as stone. "I'm looking for a scarf." "For my wife," Arthur replied, his voice gravelly, trying to sound like an ordinary shopper. Isabel Sterling, the store's operations director, took no more than half a second to scan him from head to toe. Her gaze said it all: not suitable. Not wealthy enough, not worth the time. I'm sorry, our scarves are part of a limited collection. Available by appointment only. You may check our website. Arthur tried again. I've come all the way here. Just a quick look. I only want to see. Just then, a young employee was about to step out from the adjacent counter. Tall and lean, brown-haired name tag, reading Leo, clearly intending to intervene. But Isabel's glance was like a blade. One sharp look, and he froze, turned away slowly, as if he had seen nothing at all. Isabel turned back to Arthur. Her smile remained, but her tone shifted. It was no longer a polite refusal, but a sentence handed down. Vance Atelier places great value on standards. We can't allow just anyone in, as it would diminish the brand experience. Perhaps other stores would be better suited to your needs. Then she turned away, leaving Arthur standing alone. Ignored, disregarded. Not because of who he was, but because they thought he was nobody. His chest sank. A wave of humiliation struck him like a punch to the gut. Not because he was turned away, but because this used to be a place he believed stood for beauty, for kindness. Now, it was a hollow shell. And he knew this wasn't just an incident. It was a symptom of a deeper illness, rotting from within. Arthur didn't leave. Instead of turning his back, like a rejected customer, he stepped aside and tucked himself into a shadowy corner near the spiral staircase behind the handbag display. From there, he could see most of the store's main floor, able to observe without being noticed. The first thing he realized, this was no longer a store. It was a stage. Damien Croft, the newly appointed creative director, emerged from the VIP lounge like a model stepping onto a runway. Deep blue silk blazer, smug smile, he moved not to assist customers, but to perform. A well-known influencer walked in. Damien immediately strode over, already holding a newly released leather handbag. Hold it like this, chin up a bit. Don't forget to tag our account, he said, then quickly guided her to a well-lit corner for photos. After a few shots, the girl handed the bag back. Damien said nothing, just slid it into a nearby drawer, as if no transaction had ever occurred. Arthur frowned. This wasn't marketing. This was manipulation. Then a middle-aged couple walked in, plainly dressed, clearly not the kind of customers worth showing off online. They were turned away at the first step. Isabel, still wearing that emotionless smile, repeated the familiar phrase, by appointment only. Arthur watched as the couple turned away, embarrassed. But just before they reached the door, Isabel discreetly slipped a black business card into the woman's hand. The motion lasted only a second, but he saw it, clear as day. Arthur silently pulled out his phone, captured the moment. Before he could make sense of it all, something even more disturbing unfolded. A man entered, clearly a true VIP, dressed like a finance executive. Damien personally approached him and signaled for a staff member to go into the back room. A few minutes later, they returned with a black leather box inside an old watch model Arthur knew had been discontinued for years. Damien smiled at the client, speaking just low enough that Arthur could only catch fragments. Last prototype. Not listed anywhere. Reserved for collectors only. Arthur nearly laughed. The price Damien quoted was triple the watch's real value. And more importantly, that item wasn't supposed to be for sale. Now he understood. Damien wasn't just running a store. He was orchestrating an elaborate black market right at the heart of the empire Arthur had built. And worse, this operation was organized, structured, governed by its own rules, and had clear accomplices. This wasn't the work of a few rogue individuals. This was a network. And if Arthur hesitated any longer, it would devour everything he had ever created. Late that afternoon, in a discreetly rented office in the Flatiron district, Arthur Vance stood before a long table cluttered with documents, his expression as taut as a drawn wire. He had just tossed his phone onto the table. On the screen were images captured by his covert camera, Isabel handing over the black business card video of Damien performing with the product, and an audio clip secretly recorded as a VIP client was pitched an illicit item. Grant, the trusted legal advisor who had stood by Arthur for over 2 decades, sat at the head of the table. Beside him was Maya, a 25-year-old tech prodigy data analytics wizard, silver-dyed hair, always wearing one earbud. "This is what I saw with my own eyes," Arthur said, his voice low and icy. "Every inch of that store is being manipulated by people with no ethics." Maya immediately opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard in silence. "That black business card. I've tracked it. It links to a private fashion consultancy. Owner Evelyn Croft," Damien's wife Grant pressed. "Exactly," Maya nodded. "She's the one running it. They're redirecting unfit customers out, then selling premium services through their own company." Arthur clenched his fist. Grant flipped open a folder. "As for the black market, our financial tracking traced the transactions. Damien's using an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The sum has already exceeded 30 million, but Maya wasn't finished." She pulled up a series of files on the large conference screen. The blue light illuminated her face, cold sharp. "There's something bigger, Arthur." Her voice dropped. "He's not just stealing, he's staging a takeover." On the screen appeared a string of legal documents, intellectual property agreements, brand registration records, and extracted internal emails. "He's registered a new product line called Vance Private Collection under a subsidiary company using your name to bypass direct oversight." Arthur's jaw tightened. "And here's the list of board members he's already convinced," Maya continued. "2 current directors have signed commitments to support the new strategic direction, which is actually a no-confidence vote." Grant nodded grimly, tension etched across his face. "Next month's board meeting. If he wins, you'll be ousted from your own company." The war room fell silent. Arthur slowly sat down, his hand resting on the brand's logo engraved into the file folder. His gaze no longer burned with anger, but with unwavering resolve. "All right," he said quietly. "If he wants to play this game, then we play it to the end." "We need someone on the inside," Grant said, eyes fixed on Arthur. "Someone who can access Damien's private office without raising suspicion." Arthur paused in thought. Then he quietly pulled up a photo on his phone, one taken when he was turned away at the store. In the corner of the image, a face appeared. A young man standing behind the counter, his eyes uneasy but sincere. "Leo. He tried to help me," Arthur said. "Call him." 3 hours later, Leo sat in a quiet cafe in Brooklyn, gripping his coffee cup like a lifeline. His eyes moved from Maya to Grant, then finally settled on Arthur. You're really Mr. Vance?" Leo asked softly. Arthur nodded. "I don't want anyone to know I contacted you. This conversation never happened." Leo swallowed hard. "If they find out, they'll destroy me." Arthur leaned forward, his gaze not commanding, but hopeful. "Leo, I'm not asking you to be a hero. I just need you to do what's right." Leo hesitated for a moment, then nodded. That evening, Leo returned to the store, pretending to work the night shift. He waited until the rest of the staff had left, leaving only a few cleaners behind. His heartbeat quickened as he approached Damien's office, a private glass room, always locked and soundproofed. Maya had given him a special USB device. Once plugged into a computer, it would automatically copy the entire hard drive within 3 minutes. He retrieved the spare key Isabel usually kept in the admin drawer. The door opened, The room was dark, luxurious, filled with awards, art pieces, and an IMAX screen in sleep mode. Leo took a deep breath and stepped inside. He plugged in the USB. The light began blinking. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The door creaked open. Leo froze. Damien had returned. He entered the room as if he had forgotten something. With no time to react, Leo slipped behind a large curtain covering the filing cabinet. He held his breath, listening to Damien's footsteps. The man rifled through a drawer, then paused. Leo's heart pounded like a drum in his chest. Then, the sound of the door closing. Damien had left. Leo exhaled, nearly collapsing in relief. The USB light had stopped blinking. Done. He pulled it out, slipped it into his pocket, and exited the room as quickly and quietly as possible. That night, in his tiny apartment, Leo sent the data to Maya through a secure, encrypted channel. She opened the first file, and her eyes widened. The evidence was all there. Bribery emails, secret contracts, and a list of board members who had been bought. Even a draft of a press release set to go out next week. Arthur Vance announces retirement for personal reasons. Arthur read the line, clenched his fists. Not if I speak first. The next day, the Alabaster Arch was dressed in all the glamour of a Hollywood gala. A red carpet stretched from the entrance all the way to the Soho sidewalk. Crystal chandeliers reflected against the polished glass walls, creating an atmosphere of stifling luxury. Staff dressed in black uniforms, high collars, buttoned to the neck, greeted each guest with robotic but flawless precision. At the center of the store, Damien Croft appeared like the leading star. Wearing a white tuxedo and holding a champagne flute, he floated from group to group, shaking hands, laughing loudly, commanding the space like a director guiding the performance of his life. Behind him, a gold-lettered sign gleamed, Debut Vance Private Collection. Familiar journalists, top influencers, and the 2 board members he had won over were all in attendance. Each was catered to personally served with cocktails named after individual handbag designs. Everything was choreographed to declare one thing: a new era was beginning without Arthur Vance. Damien raised his glass and stepped on to the central platform. The microphone was live. His voice echoed through the high-end sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not just unveiling a collection. We are opening a new chapter 1, where Vance Atelier is more refined, more selective, more powerful. Bang! The main doors burst open. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor, causing every head to turn. Arthur Vance entered, his back straight, gaze cold as steel. Behind him walked Grant, in a grey suit, holding documents. Maya with her laptop and headset. Leo tense but resolute. And finally, someone no one expected: Jessica, the girl from the TikTok video, and her father, a working-class man in a construction outfit, face lined with hardship. No one spoke. The music stopped. The air froze. Damien stood frozen on the platform, champagne flute, suspended mid-air. His smile stiffened into stillness in a single beat. Arthur walked forward slowly. His eyes swept across the room, the ones who had sided with Damien, the ones who had abandoned him. But he didn't need anyone on his side now. He had brought the truth. Damien forced a smile, raising his glass as if still in control. Arthur, what are you doing here? This is Arthur, cut in his voice, loud and resolute. A wonderful speech, Damien. He took a few steps forward, now standing in the center of the room. But it seems you've forgotten a few very important members of your audience. He turned and pointed at Jessica. Do you recognize this young woman? Damien glanced over, but said nothing. She's one of thousands who once believed in this brand. People who loved fashion, who believed in what Vance once stood for: aspiration, kindness. and this very place threw her out onto the street because she wasn't wearing the right kind of clothes. Damien's hand tightened slightly around his champagne glass, but he still forced a smile. Arthur, you're disrupting an important event. If you have internal concerns, we can… Internal Maya scoffed from behind, then stepped forward and plugged an HDMI cable directly into the store's display system. Every LCD screen on the walls, previously looping high-end fashion videos, suddenly switched. Now every surface glowed with financial records, internal emails, and crystal-clear screenshots of funds wired to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The words Croft Holdings repeated like an unerasable tattoo. A video clip played. Damien's voice boomed through the speakers. She looks like she walked straight out of Walmart. If we keep letting in people like that, we'll lose our value instantly. The room fell into a dead silence. A journalist quietly hit record. An influencer took a step back, pulling their phone from their pocket. The two board members, who had previously smiled beside Damien, now turned pale. Then the final clip played. An internal call recording Damien's voice low but unmistakable. Just vote with me. Once the old man Vance is out, we split the brand. I've already cleared the path. Damien lunged for the microphone. These are fabrications. He's on a personal revenge trip. Leo stepped forward. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. I'm the one who pulled that data. None of it was altered. I saw everything. All eyes shifted to Damien. The murmurs began soft at first, then rising in volume and intensity. Arthur turned to Jessica. She clutched her father's hand, eyes wide with shock and emotion. He placed a firm, reassuring hand on her shoulder. The truth, Damien, always finds its way in. Damien said nothing. He stepped back, his eyes wild like a man who had just seen the gates of hell swing open. Damien remained in the center of the store. Harsh white lights illuminating a face drained of all color. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Around him, the eyes of the crowd, no longer curious, but repulsed. Arthur stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. You're not just a fraud, Damien. You're a parasite. You drained this brand of its money, its ideas, and its soul. He turned to the counter, where Isabel Sterling stood, her face pale as paper. And you are his accomplice. You disrespected the customers. You turned a space built on trust into a stage for arrogance. No one spoke. Suddenly, two people emerged from the crowd, plain suits. They held up gold badges. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Damien Croft, Isabel Sterling. You are under arrest for financial fraud and conspiracy to misappropriate corporate assets. The entire room fell silent. An agent cuffed Damien right there in front of everyone. He screamed, I'm the one who took this brand to the top. Arthur is just a dusty old name. Arthur didn't respond. He stepped forward and grabbed the velvet rope dividing the guests from the VIP area, the very symbol of the exclusivity Damien preached. He yanked it down. The rope fell to the marble floor, coiling like a red scar across the stone. Arthur picked it up and threw it to the agent. Burn it. Applause erupted. Not thunderous, just a few people at first. Then it spread. Guest staff, even those who had stayed silent before, now raised their voices. Arthur turned to Leo, who stood frozen, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Leo, he said loudly, you're no longer a store clerk. You're our new director of customer experience. And your first job, make sure these doors stay open. Leo nodded, eyes misty. The applause swelled again. Arthur turned to Jessica. She hadn't spoken a word since entering, but her eyes glowed with belief. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was the original Starlight charm. He placed it in her hand. This is the real thing, he said gently. It's not for the rich. It's for those who believe in light, even in the dark. Never let anyone put out that light. Jessica bit her lip and nodded. Her father placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder and said quietly, "Thank you for seeing her." Arthur turned back to face the crowd. No longer an audience, but witnesses. He looked straight at a female reporter holding a recorder. His voice rang out like a declaration: Vance Atelier is dead, and today it is reborn. Outro, message and call to action. If you found this story thought-provoking and want to continue exploring emotional, human-centered, and deeply cinematic narratives like this one, hit follow and subscribe to Toch Story. We'll be back with new stories every week, not just to tell them, but to understand together more about people, about choices, and about the seemingly small things that can change an entire life. Toch Story. Touching emotions, touching hearts.